Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Courtside with Beilinson Tennis, part of the Tennis Channel Podcast Network. Here, as always, with my co-host and Hall of Famer, Steve Flink. Steve, we said it on the pod last week. I put something out yesterday. We're recording this for the viewers and listeners on Sunday night. I put something out yesterday. I thought it was all lining up for Sasha. I really did. Came in hot at Rome, beat everyone along the way, had a tough draw. He was pretty close today, Steve, but there was a guy who was just a little bit better. And we all knew he would win the French Open eventually. We thought it would maybe be the first of his slams. It's been the third slam that he won. But Carlos Alcaraz just a little bit too good today.
No, he was. He was. Listen, you and I, we were tossing it around, and I got your case for Zverev, and I had felt that before the tournament that I did think he would win. Coming into the match, though, my feeling was okay. The Carlos had found his form, and he survived a tough five-setter with Sinner in the semis, and that because it was a final, that he was going to rise to the occasion better than Zverev. In the end, that's what happened. When the crunch came, he was the steelier, tougher competitor, and he believed in himself. And we've seen it now, David, three times. He's played a U.S. He's played. He plays a U.S. Open final against Casper Ruud and wins it in four. He beats Djokovic in a five-set Wimbledon final last year. The Open was 2 years ago, and now this another five-setter, 3-0 in major finals, and of course the youngest ever to have won on three majors on three different surfaces, which is astounding.
Astounding, really
Yeah.
astounding. I was going back in my head and remember, Andre Agassi was in the final. He was favored in 1990 and he was favored in 1991 at the French Open. But he won he won Wimbledon in 92, US Open in 94. Even if he won one of those French Opens in 90 or 91, he would have been 24 years old. So not 21 like Carlos. It really is astounding, Steve.
Yeah, Rafa was 22. That was the closest call, but
Yeah.
most of the other guys late 20s. That's in Djokovic as well, and then that's understandable. And now, of course, we also should put into perspective that a lot of the old time players early in the Open era, the people like Arthur Ashe, who won the Australian and won Wimbledon and the Open, won three of the four majors. But in those days, three of the four majors were on grass.
Yeah.
You couldn't do it on three
Right.
surfaces. But since it's been available, it's very elite cast of guys that have managed the feat, but no one younger than Carlos.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get into it, and we'll go set by set. And it started out. I mean, an extremely nervy start for both players. I mean, Zverev comes out the first game. He's serving. He opens up with two double faults, changes rackets immediately. It was probably mentally a good move from him. He gets broken, but then he breaks Carlos right back. So they both got broken early. Both were nervy. Carlos eventually breaks at 2-2, and then we go from there.
Yeah, they both were having a lot of trouble from the end where they got broken in the beginning of the match. And it seemed like they were looking into the sun at that point. And I believe they also were, the wind was in their face coming at them too. So there were factors, there were reasons. But what was interesting, Dave, is that first set, Carlos is in Medvedev land, returning serve from near the fence. And Zverev did not adjust well. He got broken three times. As you said, Carlos broke again, but then he broke again at the end of the set at 5-3, three breaks of serve. And I thought that Zverev didn't adjust well, and Carlos did a fantastic job of just lofting those returns back, rolling them deep down the middle, and getting into the points. And that had to be frustrating for Sasha, who was looking to get the free points on serve. But he didn't try the tactic that everybody tries against Medvedev until late, maybe very sparing, hardly at all. Just try to serve and volley, especially in the deuce court, swing it wide and come in. And Carlos is going to have to make an incredible return from back there, or else you're going to volley into the open court. So
And Steve, the
that's
mixing of heights that you mentioned, the mixing of heights, the different spins, Andy Roddick mentioned it too. It was, I don't see it when I watch Carlos. He does it. Don't get me wrong. He does it, but he was doing it a lot more often in this match and not allowing Zverev to get in any sort of rhythm. Thought it was a really good job during the first set. Zverev adjusted later on. We'll get to that. But
well,
thought it was a good move by Carlos.
absolutely, it's difficult to deal with, and he's remarkable that way. And it does break your rhythm. Uh, but it was particularly frustrating to have those returns come. It's one thing to have to deal with it during the rally or on Carlos, get through his service games more quickly than he was able, and he certainly doesn't want to be broken three times. But then obviously tide turned quite a bit in the second set.
Yeah, second set, it was interesting. Zverev was having trouble flattening the forehand down the line. It was more kind of a loopy type of forehand. His cross court forehand was a lot better, and he flattened that out a lot better. The second set, Zverev breaks it 2-2 to go up 3-2. He breaks again later, wins the set 6-2. Where one said, "Oh, I'll let you speak about the second set, and then we'll get into the third where it really got interesting."
Yeah, it started off with a marathon game with Carlos at 40 love, and then he almost gets broken. A whole bunch of he manages to hold, but then from 1-2, Zverev, on serve, that's where he ran out the set, and and I thought Carlos maybe definitely changed in the third set, but I thought he even changed a bit in the second set, moving in a little closer, and that's to Sasha's liking. He started to serve better and get more free points, and he played a really good set. And maybe I don't think Carlos did as much of the looping shots. I think that was very frustrating. And you mentioned about the forehand down the line, and I think the ball would get up high, and he didn't feel like he felt like he almost had to go across. He didn't trust his down the line, the flatter shot off Carlos's high rollers. So, but it was a good second set from Zverev to come back strong after disappointing first and win it convincingly. And then, but then the third set, of course, was the most interesting of the match because Carlos got the break. He's up 4-2, and he actually goes up 5-2. Zverev had a chance. People forget to break back in that seventh game, and he was a little unlucky on one of the break points where Carlos hit the baseline with a backhand that ball kind of skidded on Zverev, and he had no play, and that was a little bit of good fortune for Carlos. But still, he gets to 5-2. And then Zverev is down 15-30, but he serves his way out of that and then breaks Carlos in the next game. And then he really started to roll. And again, until Zverev served for the set, Carlos was standing further in and was susceptible to those bigger serves. And he even got caught on a couple of bigger second serves, some 123s. So we go to
5
6-5.
games in a row, Steve. 5 games in a row from Zverev. Carlos never had a set point.
No, he didn't. But he got to 30 all in that game, but then Zverev broke it. That was a critical game, that ninth game. He came from love 30 to 30 all and then made kind of a sloppy error, and Zverev hit a great pass to break him. But in the 6-5 game, David, that's the one I thought was so interesting because Zverev went to 30 love, and you thought maybe it's going to be a quick hold, and then Carlos is moving back, and he gets right back into that game. Still, Zverev has a set point, which Carlos saves. He's now throwing in those loopers, tantalizing shots. And he's basically saying to Zverev, you deal with this. I'm not giving this to you. You're going to have to come up with it because you're not going to. And he went from set point up to break point down, got out of it, and finally closed it out. And he had that look on his face at that moment, looking up, I believe, at his father. We couldn't see who it was, but we assumed it was his father. And I felt like it was the look that kind of like, okay, I'm there now. I can do this.
I was with you, Steve. I'm like, oh man, this prediction of mine, the feeling that I had. I mean, he had beaten Carlos. I think it's also important to state that, look, heading into this match, he led Carlos head to head 5-4, but it's not just that lead in the head to head. He had beaten Carlos in very important matches in slams before, not in a final, but to have that belief, that means something as opposed to never beating this guy in a major before.
No, absolutely. Beat him here 2 years ago when Carlos was a clear had a real chance to, even then, to win the title. And then he beat him in Australia this year. Both of those were 4-setters. Both of those where he won the first 2 sets. Carlos came back typically with his usual competitive spirit to win the third and then lose in 4. And yeah, those do make a difference. But of course, he understood that Carlos is more dangerous in a major final. Here's what surprised me the most about the match. Here, he's made that comeback. He's won 5 games in a row. Instead of being 2-1 down, he's 2-1 up. He's 1 set away from his first major. The first 4 games of the 4th set, he won 5 points.
Yeah.
And I thought it was a very disappointing from his end because I don't think Carlos played beautifully, threw in a couple of drop shot winners. He was heads up.
The passing shot down the line, the forehand passing shot down the line to get that break, it was a curveball. You've seen it from Rafa so many times on the lefty forehand.
No, that was a beauty. And no, so he made some shots like that, but he got too many gifts. And he wasn't being made to work hard. And I'm sure he was appreciative of it because after he goes up 4 love, he gets broken. and then calls the trainer, and they're rubbing his leg, and you don't know how serious it is. We soon saw that it obviously was not that serious. Whatever was going on, he was moving fine, and but when they came back out after the trainer, Zverev again had some chances to hold to close the gap to 4-2,
right,
and didn't do it. Made
he
some
got
bad.
one break back at 4-0, and then he just
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, but this could have now been one break back at 4-11. Now Carlos is serving at 4-2, and he's a little nervous. Instead, he's 5-1. He still was down break points at 5-1, Carlos, but he got through it. He got through the set. And okay, so you're still thinking at this point, okay, it's one set for all the marbles here in the fifth. They're both going to go full force here.
How are you feeling at this point before we talk about the fifth set? How are you? I mean, the fourth set went really quickly, really quickly. Your view in this fifth set, you're like, hey, this is one set for the win the title. Were you leaning Carlos at this point?
I was, but I thought that Zverev might give himself an opportunity because he was serving first. And I together some strong holds again, like he was doing in the second and third sets, and put some pressure on Carlos to be serving at 2-3, 3-4, 4-5, something like that. But instead, he wins. He wins this, holds on nicely in the first game. Carlos holds, and then Zverev played a terrible game.
Terrible game.
Worst terrible games. Game. Started with a backhand volley down the line. He did a perfect approach. Carlos was stranded in the backhand corner. A backhand volley down the line lands anywhere in the court, and Carlos wasn't chasing it, and it goes long. Then he plays a delayed serve and volley, and he bungles the forehand first volley from right on top of the net.
Yep.
Then a double fault, and then a backhand error. 4 giveaways.
Yeah, terrible. It was a horrible game from him.
Yeah, and that really, but then it's followed by Carlos immediately going down love 40. Yes. And then Carlos saves one break point, and there was a very important moment at the match where he's called for a double fault. They call a double fault, so you think that Zverev has the break. The linesman called it wide. He was going down the tee, Carlos, with some slice. It was kind of curving back in, but called wide. And then the umpire comes down, and I think the announcers I certainly felt, I thought the umpire was just going to confirm the call. He wanted to be sure, but no, he immediately points to the line, and then poor Zverev was pretty exasperated, but he couldn't talk him out of it. So now, now the point is, now Carlos is still alive. He wins the point. He comes all the way back to hold. And that was a
11-minute game, Steve, 11-minute game, right?
Yeah, long game. But the point is it was a love 40 start and the 15-40, and Zverev in his head probably thought he had the break back to 2-all. I don't think there's any that you can read in too much into it to think that, okay, he would have won the match. He just would have been in better shape to now try to serve his way out in front again. And it would have given him some encouragement. But nevertheless, he doesn't get the break. And then he's down break point himself, and he gets out of it, rolls a backhand cross court. Beauty.
I thought that was a very important point. And I said, because I mean, this match kind of like no lead was too safe, right? And I felt like if Carlos had lost this fifth set, that was the critical juncture right there when Carlos could get up a double break, didn't get it. And I made a note. I wrote it on my notepad. I'm like, okay, look, if Zverev wins, you're pointing to this point that Carlos could have had a double break and he didn't get it. So it's 2-3, but then we know what happens after.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Carlos went and checked the mark and realized it hit the line. So in his mind, I don't think he was frustrated. He didn't think he'd gotten a bad call. He knew it was a great shot. And then Zverev gets the hole. But then in the next game, once again, break point, Carlos volleys his way out of it. That was another critical point because it's a chance for Zverev to be back to 3-all. But when Carlos was serving and volleying, he did it in such a cagey fashion that he'd be pretty tight on the net for the first volley. And Zverev was not able to get returns down low enough, killing him with that when he tried it. So that once he got to 4-2, then just lost only one more point. It was over. But those break back games for Zverev were so important, and he just couldn't get back. The mystery is why he played such a bad game himself at 1-all.
Yeah. That was a killer because that set the tone. He was always behind the whole set. How about that incredible one-handed backhand passing shot that Carlos made?
Yeah.
I mean, the shot making from him is just it's out of this world. I mean, some of the stuff he does.
And he was loose then. He felt like he had it in hand. Once he'd gotten the hole for 4-2, I think he felt like that, and he made that shot in the seventh game, and it was a beauty cross court. And yeah, no, he's so inventive and
fun to watch.
how often it's so rare that you watch one of his matches where he doesn't make at least 2 or 3 shots like the one you just described, where you're shaking your head and say, where in the world did he find that one? How did he invent that one? He does it left and right.
Let me ask you this, Steve. Where does this leave Zverev? And I ask that in the context of he's won everything else other than a major. He had a really, really difficult draw here, and he got through it until today, obviously, one set short. You know, beating Rafa, yeah, that was straight sets, but it was over 3 hours. And just the emotion of that match, the hype before it. He didn't get to work himself work himself into the tournament. He had to be at his A game from the get go. He had a brutal draw, and he did really well to get to it. Um, I know it's incredibly tough to win one of these things. He doesn't have to face Roger or Rafa anymore. Novak, there's some questions with Novak, and we also don't know how long Novak's going to play. Are you, you know, are you leaning to the side where he does get through, he knocks down the door, and he does get a major?
I'm not leaning in either direction anymore. I thought this was a golden opportunity coming into the tournament, and still was today. Obviously, here's what I'd say though about the draw. You're right; it was a tough draw. However, the Griekspoor match where he's down 4-1, 2 breaks in the fifth is the third round. Then the Holger Rune in the fourth round, where he's down 2 sets to 1, goes to a 4-set tiebreak, and he wins the breaker and wins 6-2 in the fifth. But from there, he did a nice job. He took care of De Minaur in straight sets, very efficient. Came back from a set down against Casper Ruud and beat him comfortably in 4. So that I think was important for him to conserve some energy in those 2 matches after the 2 5-setters in the preceding round. So I thought he was fresh enough physically. I actually thought he looked good physically all the way through. I just think somehow he cracked a bit in the fifth, and Carlos does not let you get away with that. He's too good.
He doesn't. Yeah, no, thank you for sharing thoughts. I wanted to hear your opinion on that. All right. We talked about the men. We got to go now to the women's side and talk Iga Swiatek because, Steve, this person, we're going to be, we're not going to compare her to, anyone else who you think we may mention because that's unfair to anybody. But, Steve, she's won 21 matches in a row now at Roland Garros. She's won 4 French Open titles. She's won 5 slams. She beat what was it? She lost 17 games to Osaka in that incredible match in the second round. I think she lost just a few more than 17 combined the rest of the way. She rolled against everybody else. In the semifinals, she played Coco, beats Coco 6-4, 6-2. She now leads 11-1 in that head-to-head. Shout out Coco Gauff for winning the doubles final. Shout out Paulini, who gets the runner up in singles and in doubles. She gets a nice paycheck with both of those. But Steve, Iga Swiatek, I mean, just rolling right now.
Yeah, listen, I mean, that's she shows you what a great champion she is. But there's no doubt she would be the first to admit she needed some good fortune to get out of that match with Naomi Osaka, who was on fire that day. Because Naomi had a set point in the first set, didn't win that one, tore through the second set and went up 5-2 in the third and had a match point at 5-3. So Iga was on the brink, but she kept her cool, her usual composure. And then what she does, rather than have her spirits dampened by that, then it's like, okay, Naomi almost had me, but that's it. Nobody's touching me now. That's who she is.
And shout out to Renee Stubbs, who we've had on our pod. She called it. She said that's the match you got to get through. And then she expected Iga to roll, and she certainly did do that.
Yeah, no, look, I there's no doubt in my mind she can win a bunch more French. Chrissy has the record for women at 7. I think good chance that Iga will tie that, maybe even break it. But to me, for her to go down as she will go down as one of the great players for sure. But to go down in among the elite, she's got to now start showing us that she can win Wimbledon, that she can win the Australian, that she can win more than one U.S. Open. That's not a knock on her, but I just feel like with her game, she should be better on the quicker course. She should be able to adjust. That's going to be the next challenge because she's so dominant on the clay. It takes a spectacular performance from an Osaka to give her that scare, but nobody else could come near her.
And you could make that same statement, and others can make that same statement to a young Rafa Nadal back in 2008, maybe, before he started. He won Wimbledon in 2008. But people were still making that type of statement too, like, wow, he's winning all these French Opens. Can he win on any other surface?
No, I hear you, but I don't entirely agree because look at Rafa. By 2006, he's in the Wimbledon final against Roger, taking a set. By
Yep.
2007, he's going five with Roger. You know what I mean? And then he also beat him in a hardcore time. I'm saying he was a little further along. He did have to prove himself for sure, and it took him a while. He didn't win that U.S. Open for the first time till two longer. And
When was that? We missed you on that. When did you say that year was when he won the Open? You froze up for a second.
U.S. Oh yeah, he won the U.S. Open in 2010. Finally, won the Australian in nine, and he won Wimbledon in eight, of course. So I felt like he was conquering it faster. I'm a little worried about Iga in that regard because I feel like some players have been able to sort of just out hit her and blast her off the court in some of these matches in Australia and Wimbledon. I hope that changes. Wimbledon will be fascinating for that reason because she's come off her fifth major, her fourth French. She's really riding so high. She's just far and away the best woman player in the world and knows it. I hope she has a great Wimbledon because I really think she's worthy of those other titles. I was happy a couple of years ago when she won the U.S. Open, and I'd like to see more of that from her on the other surfaces because that's the next step.
Coco Gauff. She's consistently now making deep, very deep runs in slams right now. Where's your outlook on her? You got to be so bullish on Coco right now.
No, I am. I look. She did very well. She once again got outplayed from the backcourt by Iga. There were no solutions. Her forehand went at certain times. She served okay, but it's not a disappointing tournament. She played really well the whole tournament, and so she loses the semifinal this time to Iga. She lost to Sabalenka in the semis of Australia. So since the Open, she's been in two major semis in a row,
Right.
And now she'll head to Wimbledon, where I think she's going to do very well. Yeah, I am. I think she's on the right track, and
you don't see any first round Wimbledon losses anymore.
no,
All
no,
these very early round. I mean, you see the development of the game and her getting into the consistently latter stages of these slams.
no. I expect her to go very deep at Wimbledon, and I expect her to have a shot at defending the Open title. I think she'll be in the thick of things. And I mean, for instance, it would be very interesting to watch her on a good serving day against Iga at Wimbledon, let's say. It'd be very interesting to see her get another crack at Sabalenka in the U.S. Open, where she beat her in the final last year, with the crowd urging her on again. I just feel like she's going to have some golden moments at both Wimbledon and the Open, and a pretty good summer in between. And I'm looking forward to it.
What about Carlos Alcaraz winning the career Grand Slam now? I mean, can it happen in 2025 in Australia? That's the only one missing right now.
He'll be right in the thick of things. Obviously, we don't, I expect Novak to be coming back there looking to regain the crown, and probably hopefully has recovered well from his knee surgery. And Sinner will be determined to defend his title. So Carlos isn't going to have it easy over it, but there's no reason he couldn't. I wouldn't be a bit surprised if that's where he completed the career Grand Slam that soon. Wouldn't be surprised at all because that pace that might start changing. It might be becoming more than one a year in the next few years. I suspect it will. And so, yeah, I think he'll target Australia. I think he'll be very eager to get that one in, to add that to his collection. So I would give him a very good chance looking at it long term now.
And now the questions remain with Novak Djokovic, because I mean it was unfortunate with what happened to him during this major. The scheduling was crazy. 4 hours and 29 minutes one match, 4 hours and 39 minutes the next match. Has not won a title this year. He did have this successful surgery, which is good. We don't know about Wimbledon at this point. He did say he wants to play the Olympics, but any major that he wins now, Steve, it's getting harder and harder, not because his level necessarily declined, and there could be arguments that his level has dipped a bit, but that his competitors, the top guys right now, are getting stronger.
No, I hear you, but I mean, I just keep thinking back to what a great year he had last year. And sure, things did not start off well because he had some difficult moments in early stages of the Australian, then started around into form, and then played that kind of a baffling match against Sinner in the sense that the first two sets were just a whitewash, and then he finally lost in four. Yeah, I mean, everything that could have gone wrong this year has, starting with that match, then on to Indian Wells, and then disruptive clay court campaign. He just hasn't been able to. But I think if he comes out of the knee surgery well, uh, I don't think there's much of a chance he plays Wimbledon, by the way. I think that's very, very unlikely. It's too soon. And I think the doctors may feel like he's risking it to try to come back too soon. So I think he can accept that and just go back on the clay, try to win the Olympics. By the end of the summer, again, if the knee's holding up, he may be fresher than a lot of other guys at the U.S. Open.
True.
And be in with a chance there to defend his title. And then my feeling is he's going to give 2025 everything he has and try to see, if he hasn't gotten the 25th this year, to really try to nail that down, maybe in Australia or wherever it may be next year, and do as much as he can. And then quite likely by the end of 2025, he's ready to say goodbye. But I don't think before then, because I don't think he likes the idea that his injuries and whatever the other reasons were for underperforming in the early stages of the year are how he would bow out. That's not him. He'll want to respond here.
This was a lot of fun. This was it always is a long clay court season, but these couple weeks in Roland Garros was really fun. It started right out of the chute with Rafa and Zverev, and then you had the second round with Osaka and Iga. There was just a lot of really good tennis throughout the fortnight. I'll leave it to you to close it out. Anything else you want to hit on before we conclude the episode?
No, I would just say I think that Sinner. I'm fascinated to see Sinner. I've never seen Sinner look more disturbed. That maybe is not the right word. More disconsolate after a loss. He went and hugged Rafa, but it wasn't the usual. I
Not
could
Rafa,
tell
Carlos.
this.
Carlos, you mean? You said
What's
Rafa.
that?
You said Rafa. You mean Carlos.
No, I'm talking.
You said
What's that?
Sinner hugged Rafa. You mean
No,
Sinner?
no. Hugging Carlos.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. He after the fifth set was over and he went over. It was not their usual kind of greeting. It was perfectly fine and respectful, but the warmth wasn't there. And I feel like this one hurt him more. And he has the greatest respect for Alcaraz, and we all know that. And I think they'll always respect each other. But I think it was the second match in a row where he won a very decisive first set against Rafa. I keep saying Rafa. Against Carlos. He wins it 6-1 first set against Carlos at Indian Wells, and then ends up losing 3-2. And here he's up 6-2 to love, and he ends up losing in 5. And he was also up 2-1. So I'm fascinated to see what the Sinner that emerges at Wimbledon. I feel like he's at that stage now. He's just found out that he's number one in the world, Sinner. Then he ends up losing to Alcaraz, which it happens a lot historically. Guys knowing that they've got enough points that the next week they're going to number one, and that particular week they lose, and it's tough to accept that because you're just celebrating the fact that you're now the official world number one. So I'll be watching it. I have a feeling we're going to see a very determined Jannik Sinner at Wimbledon this year.
Well, I say it all the time. It feels like it's a long time, and it is, between Australia and the French Open. French and Wimbledon is a sprint. So before you know it, we're going to be talking about the third major of the year. So stay with us, hang in there with us. And this was a lot of fun, Steve. I appreciate all of your time, all of your insight. This was a really fun couple weeks for all tennis fans.
Yeah, great couple of weeks, and it didn't end the way Sasha Zverev wanted it to, but it sure did for Carlos. And it's a great victory for him, because I don't really think at the start of the tournament he seriously believed he was hoping, he was dreaming, but he didn't really expect it given the bad preparation he'd had, and the unfortunate struggle with his arm. And for him to win this tournament wearing that darn sleeve the entire tournament. It still amazes me how he got used to that and accepted it and just played his normal brand of tennis despite that.
A lot of fun, Steve. Thanks so much for your time again. I enjoyed it.
Thank you, David.